Hello, everyone. You're listening to Michelle Speaks on 180radionow.com, currently heard in over 128 countries around the world. And I'm your host, Michelle Portier, founder of Healing Women, Healing Nations of Northeast Florida. We live in a society that condones living behind masks, hiding who we are and the issues we face, some too taboo to discuss with anyone. You may be worried about being judged or ashamed of what others may be thinking of you. Michelle Speaks not only uncovers it, but we look for solutions to deal with it head on. Stay tuned as we get to the heart of the matter, because if you hide it, you can't heal it. Welcome to Michelle Speaks. If you hide it, you can't heal it. No topic is taboo. I am Michelle Portier, your host of the day, and we are going to be talking about abortion, the stronghold of the enemy. I have with me here today our guest, Stephanie Harden, and she is going to be talking about this very sensitive topic. But again, it is a topic that needs to be talked about. The news is filled with stories of women being assaulted and becoming pregnant as a result. There are endless stories where the woman decides to keep the child and is forced to share custody with her assailant. There are many other instances where women feel they have no other option except to end the life of their unborn child. How do we reconcile the word of God that states in Psalm 127, verse 3, children are a heritage from the Lord and offspring a reward from him? So I want to thank you, Ms. Stephanie Harden, for agreeing to come on and be so transparent about a very sensitive topic. And so, for our listening audience, just tell us a little bit about who Stephanie Harden is, who you are personally, professionally, spiritually. I hand it over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. And it's good to see you again, Michelle.
Always a pleasure to see you.
I am Stephanie Harden, and I am a program facilitator for Girls Incorporated. And what I do is I teach young women to take care of themselves, to be strong, smart, and bold. I also teach them that there are things that happen in life that can either propel you or they can destroy you. We have to decide which one we want to be. Mm-hmm. I am a former educator. I worked in the public school system in Philadelphia for about 20-something years, and I moved to Jacksonville, and I've been here about 9 years, and I worked at a charter school for about 6 years, and then Girls Inc. nabbed me. So I have always had a, shall we say, a calling to mentor and to teach and to love and to help and to nurture. Mm-hmm. And I've accented on that, going to college, getting different degrees, but I realized that this was my calling, that I'm a gifted teacher and this is what I should be doing. And I've been working with Girls Inc. for about 2.5 years now, and it has been just absolutely stupendous. I wouldn't want to do another job after this. I love it. I've learned so much about not just myself, my girls, but myself, mm-hmm. and the things that I can accomplish and things that I can impart into other young women to help them be better.
Right. And that's what it's all about.
Yes. Most importantly, when things happen in their lives, how you can overcome that. Mm-hmm. And you can do that through God, because that was how I was able to overcome. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to our topic, which is about abortion. And mm-hmm. today I will be very transparent about my own personal experience with abortion and what happened in my life that almost destroyed me. Mm-hmm. So the first time that I was pregnant in my life, I was 15 years old.
Wow.
I came from a home of, it wasn't abuse on my part, but my parents, my father was abusive. He drank. And I didn't understand what a relationship should be like, or a family setting. I knew that we all lived together as a family because it was my sister, my brother, and my mother, and my father. But I did not understand what a whole family looks like. Because when you're a child and you see these things, you think to yourself that this is the norm. Anyway, growing up, my parents finally divorced, and my father kind of separated himself from my sister and myself and spent more time with my brother. And so I didn't have a real guide for young men or relationships or anything like that. And when you don't have that fatherly love, because I believe that you need both your parents, not just a girl needs her mother, but yeah, she needs her father. Her father is the first man that she loves. He teaches her how to respect herself and how to teach other people to respect her. I didn't have those lessons.
Right.
So I had to kind of build my own guide, which wasn't good for somebody that age.
Right.
And I got into a whole bunch of things I should not have gotten into, and promiscuity was one of them.
Right.
Because we are using what we think is love, which is sex, and we're thinking that at that age, this is love,
right,
and this is how we love another person.
Right.
We don't understand. I didn't understand that sex is an act, a part of a love relationship, and that part was supposed to be in holy matrimony.
Exactly.
I was raised Muslim in a very liberal home, so I didn't know God until I was in my 20s.
Wow. In
my early 20s. But the first time that I had gotten pregnant, I was 15 years old, and I was a boy that I really liked him, and I wanted him to like me. And so let's go ahead and do this. And we did. And I got pregnant probably the first time.
Wow.
And I was confused and I was distraught and I didn't know what to do. I went to my mother and she didn't get upset. But the first thing she discussed with me was to get an abortion. And that was not my mindset. So what I decided to do was get a second opinions. And everyone in my family was saying, you have this bright future. You're a track star. You're going to go to college. You're very smart. You have all this going for you. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't mess up your life. Go ahead and have an abortion.
Right.
So here I am. I'm 15 years old. I remember I was kind of far along, so I couldn't have the conventional.
Okay.
So I had to go to the hospital. So I was there alone. My mother didn't come with me. She had to work. So
that must have been terrifying.
Yeah. I remember being in that room alone, the nurses coming in and out to check me. I didn't know what was going on with my body.
Right.
I didn't know how to react, and I actually seen everything. So that kind of freaked me out.
That can be very traumatic, especially at the age you were.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
15. And so my mindset about young men had changed dramatically.
Understandably so.
So that was abortion number one. Going along, 16 years old, because once you start having sex out of wedlock, you don't stop, right, especially if you don't have guidance. Now, my mother taught me about birth control. She taught me what I should and should not do. But my mother was an electrical engineer. She was going 3 weeks out of the month most of the time. So my sister, my brother, and I were kind of like
on your own,
raising ourselves, but we were at our house. My aunts and uncles came by to check on us, make sure we were doing what we were supposed to do.
Latchkey kids.
Right. But we had a lot of freedom, more than I would ever give my teenagers. So by the time I was 16, I was pregnant again. And I didn't know what to do. I went to my mother and I said, I don't want to do that again. I want to. She says, you're not ready.
Right.
You can't do it. I'm like, but and I suppressed my feelings from the first abortion. So then now this time I went and did the conventional one. My mother was there. She held my hand, went through the whole thing. So that was abortion number 2. Meanwhile, my self-esteem is going in the toilet. I don't have a realistic ideology of relationships.
Right.
I did not look at myself as a person of what you would call a person of worth. And I remember at 17 getting pregnant again.
Wow.
So here I am pregnant again, and I'm saying to my mother, no, I was 16 going on 17, yeah. And I was saying to my mother, I I don't want to do that again, Mom. I don't think that's right. And she said, Steph, you're trying to go to college. It was like we were using abortion as a form of birth control.
Right.
So, make a long story short, I had the third abortion. And by the time I was at my end of 17, I met my oldest daughter's father.
Okay.
And I got him pregnant. And I told my mother, that's it. I'm not doing that anymore.
Right.
I'm going to have this baby. So I graduated. I was a really good student in school. And I had scholarships for college because I was an athlete. So in my 12th grade year, I had to make a decision to go to school or go work and take care of my baby. So I dropped out of school. I went to work. And when I had my baby, I went back to school and I finished my high school diploma. I walked down the aisle with my daughter in my arms. But I still had this feeling of unworthiness and dirty and filthy, and my relationships were on that same level.
Right.
So here I'm going along. I'm 19, going on 20, and I get pregnant again.
Wow.
So this is me thinking like a 19-year-old. I had 3 abortions and I need to give back to God what I took.
Right.
So I had the second baby, my son, Quentin. And then I'm going to college and I'm trying to still figure out who I am and where I'm supposed to be. And I had a best friend in school, and she was the one that talked to me about Jesus. And her family was all saved.
Right.
So I'm confused because here I'm a Muslim. And I'm trying to practice Islam, and then she's pulling me towards Christ. And I was getting more interested in Christ because I liked what it was about. I just didn't know him.
There was a pull.
Right.
Yeah.
So I decided to go in that direction. Now, of course, everyone in my family is Muslim. So, you get the black sheep thing.
Right, of course.
And so I finally moved out on my own, got my own place, and the kids and I started trying to feel a little better about myself. I met my first husband. Before I met him, I dated a young man who I was living at my sister's house before I moved into my first apartment. And he started hitting me. And so because I seen that most of my life, I thought that was cool and it was okay.
That was normal.
So I wound up getting pregnant by him, and I wouldn't tell him that I was pregnant because I didn't want to be connected to him. And then I had another abortion. Right. I went by myself that time. So then here we are. That's abortion number 4. So I said, okay, I gotten saved after I had my son Quentin. And I said to God, I remember being in a church, and I said, I was looking at people and they're jumping and they're shouting and they're singing. And I looked around and I'm like, I want that. I want to feel like that. So I had that abortion. I moved into my place, and then I met my first husband, and he wound up being this horrible guy who used to beat on me, and I was doing everything I could not to get pregnant. Right. So the first 3 years of my marriage, I hid everything, my birth control pills, everything. I hid that stuff. And he would find it, and then finally I got pregnant 3 years later. And I remember, I'll never forget the day I told him that I was having a baby, our baby. He picked me up and tried to throw me down a flight of steps.
Wow.
So here I am in this marriage. I'm trying to figure out who I am, what I'm doing, and take care of my kids and go to work and go to school and do all of these things, because those are the things I used to push out and push down and suppress my feelings about me and what I was doing. That marriage led me to a young lady in the school that my children were going to. And one day she seen me walking into the school, and she said, I need you to come into my office. I want to talk to you. She's a counselor. So I talked to her. We had started having these counseling sessions, and she told me that I was beautiful. And I was this great person, and why am I living like this? And I don't have to live like this. And you're smart, and your kids are smart. I see the other young ladies' mothers that come and bring their kids, and you always look nice and you're always clean and the kids are clean and they're well behaved. And so you're not like them. So what's going on? So I began to tell her, because I wouldn't tell anybody what I was going through.
Right. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We put on that mask.
I told her, and she started counseling me on a regular basis. And I remember the day my ex-husband had told me that I couldn't go anymore, because I began to stand up and I began to say, look, I'm better than this. I'm worth more. I don't have to be treated like this. So I began my descent to leave. And when you're in an abusive relationship, you're fear for your life, which I had lost. I began to just fear for the children.
Right.
So it took me 2 years to actually get away from him. But I was able to get away from him. And I remember trying to get a divorce and moving in different places in Philadelphia. And he would find me everywhere I lived. And I'm saying to God, because I'm new to this. So I'm like, okay, that's when I started praying.
Right.
I said, God, I don't know how to handle this. What do I do? How do I? Because this is my husband. And I read what you said in your Bible. And I did the vows. And you said to death do us part. And I took that very seriously. But he is threatening my life.
Right.
And my children.
That's a difficult place to be in.
It is. And so divorce it just never occurred to me until I had a conversation with the minister. And he said, no one in church should ever talk to you about divorce, but you keep coming here with black eyes. That's not working.
Right.
You've left, you're running, you're scared. You can't even work. So you need to think about what's best for you and your children. So I finally got the divorce, and I met a young man after that, and I didn't want to be in a relationship. I just wanted to be by myself. By this time I had five children. No, four. And this young man, he was wonderful and nice and all of that. And I wound up having 2 children with him. And we were about to get married, and he did something that blew my mind. He took a picture of my daughter in an inappropriate way.
Oh.
So that was the end of that.
Of course.
So I decided, okay, God, I'm just not going to be with anybody. I just want to be with you.
Right.
I'm just going to raise my 6, because I wound up having 6 abortions. And these 6 babies are dedicated to you. I'm going to raise them, and I'm going to do it by myself. And I'm not going to include anybody, because I feel it's just the best thing. And I stayed single. I dated a little bit, but I stayed single, kept everybody from my house for about 15 years.
Wow. That's a testament in and of itself. So my question, I have 2 questions. The 6 children that you had, that was your way of giving back to God, the 6 children that you felt that you took from him?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That's powerful. So how, in the midst of raising the 6 children that you did have, how did you deal with the fact, or how did you process dealing with the fact that you'd ended 6 viable lives? How did you reconcile that, and how did you function in the midst of raising the children, in the midst of running from the abusive situations, in the midst of trying to stay stable in an employment environment? How did you live?
I remember going to church, and every day that I would get up, the devil would tell me, because I knew that wasn't God talking to me, that I was worthless and I was a murderer, and that I was going to church for nothing because they wasn't going to let me in the heaven. But I kept going because I didn't know any better. But and I remember sitting in my car one day. We were going to church, the kids and I, and we were sitting in the car, and I was holding onto the steering wheel, and I didn't know whether I should go in. So the kids were saying, well, Mommy, we want to go in. So I'm sitting there. So this lady walks over to my car, and she knocks on my window. So I rolled the window down. And she said, what's the matter? And I said, I'm trying to figure out if I'm going to go in.
Right.
She said, why wouldn't you want to come into church? So I told her what was happening to me and what I was hearing every day from the devil. And she told me that She said that God had said to her from across the parking lot to come and talk to me and tell me that when I get to heaven, my children that I aborted would be there waiting with open arms. So not to allow that noise in my ear to stop me from what God has for me and my family.
And again, that's that hope.
It broke that yoke off of my life.
Yes.
I remember saying that I would never talk about it. So if the devil wasn't talking about it, I wasn't going to talk about it. I'm in a church service. It was a shut-in. My pastor had finished preaching and praying, and he said, "Stephanie, don't you have something that you want to testify to?" I said, "Oh no, I'm good." He said, "Oh yeah, you do." And the Holy Spirit was raising up saying, "You need to talk about your abortion." I was like, nobody knows. I don't want anybody to know. They're going to look at me wrong. And so I did. I closed my eyes and I just began to talk about what happened to me. And I remember my first lady coming over and holding my hand. And I opened my eyes and there was like 7 or 8 women standing. So they all began to talk about their abortions and what happened to them. And I remember the Holy Spirit saying to me, "This is why I allowed this. Look at the lives that have been changed and set free because of what you endured." And I was never the same after that. Never the same. God blessed me with a new husband who I went through a whole lot with. And I watched God do a transformation in his life. And he is the most wonderful man. I had to marry him twice. That's how wonderful
Wow.
he has become. But I wanted to share with everyone in the audience that just because you go through circumstances, we can't allow the enemy to creep into our lives and stop us from being who we are. I didn't know who I was, so he was able to do that. But when I got a hold of that, when I figured out who I am and who I belong to and whose I was, all of that changed in my life. And I decided to go back to school. I finished school. I started changing the way I did things in front of my children. And when I began to line up, my family began to line up. I remember praying so hard until my husband lined up. And God had showed me different times in my life where if I would just, because I wanted to leave and just leave everything. And he said, "If you just stay, I'll bless you."
Amen.
I bless you. So even through the abortions and the abuse and the things that I suffer, I wanted to say to the young ladies that, you know, as long as you keep Jesus in front of you, you can make it.
Yeah.
I was a teenage mama from North Philly. And I was able to educate myself. God blessed me with so many things. My children are all alive and safe and doing their thing. And my baby is 19 years old now. So I don't even have babies anymore.
Wow. I wanted to say that this is a sensitive topic and it's an often touchy topic, especially where society is concerned and the church. And it's a topic that I wanted to talk about because, again, if we hide it, we can't heal it. And no topic is taboo because I myself had an abortion at a very young age, 18, 19, halfway across the world in Japan.
Wow.
Was dating a service member who I later found out was married and had a wife and child in the States, but told me he was not. So my journey was a little bit different. I was petrified. I was afraid to tell my mom. So I went by myself, and they didn't do abortions on base because we were overseas. So I had to go out in town to a Japanese doctor facility by myself. And I was about 3-4 months along. And that changed my life. It devastated me because all I remember was the doctor saying to start to count back from 100. I got to maybe 97 before, I passed out. But he strapped my legs to the stirrups. He strapped my arms down and he put this mask over my face. And when I came to, I saw the remnants. And I was so devastated. It took me many, many, many years to reconcile myself, and even to be able to forgive myself. Even though God had forgiven me, I had not forgiven myself. And so, I'm thankful for your transparency, because even though I'm transparent about a lot of things that I've endured in my life, and even though I believe I've been called to a life of transparency with the things that I do, that's not something that I shared with many people, because I was afraid of the labeling and the stigma and the shame, especially within the church. And so
the enemy does.
And I
that.
only had one, and you've endured 6. And look at you, the transformation that you've made today. So I commend you for being able to be so transparent and strong.
Thank you.
Many people say, they see the glory, but they don't know the story behind. And Stephanie, I feel like I've known you forever, but in the short amount of time that I've known you, you are one of the most God-fearing, dedicated, inspirational, powerful women that I know. And you have a heart and a passion to help our youth, and especially our young ladies, find value and worth in themselves. And, of course with God, but in themselves. And so what I wanted to ask you on this journey, even in dealing with the young ladies, but even in your own journey, what has been one of the most darkest moments, and how have you endured that on your journey, and why was that so dark for you, and how did you translate that into what you do today?
I'm writing a book. It's called No More Tears, My Journey to Christ. And one of the chapters that's chapter 7 that I'm having the hardest time writing. It talks about a situation where I was riding the subway all night. I had just 2 babies, and I was working, and I wound up being homeless. And I was staying with friends, and when the guy came home, I was staying with his mother. He wanted me to sleep with him, and I said no, so he put me out in the middle of the night with my children. Wow. So I went to the subway with them, and I rode the subway all night. I packaged up their stuff, and we sat on the subway, and the conductor came out, and he looked at me. He seen the children and the blankets, so he went back over and he said, "You're okay. I'm gonna go in here. You let me know if you need anything." And that was when the Broad Street subway ran all night in Philly. So I rode the subway. I remember coming out of the subway with my children, and I do not remember how I got to my mother's house. That moment when I came to, I was at her front door, and I fell into her arms and cried. I think I cried for like 3 days. And I remember that was a time in my life where I was learning to trust God. And I remember having prayer with my mother, who is Muslim, and now I'm Christian. Right. And in prayer, she was asking God to strengthen me. And I was telling her about, I just learned how to trust him. I got on a subway with my 2 babies in the middle of the night and asked him to watch over us. And that was my first dark thing that happened, that he covered me. Yes. And I actually felt his love and confidence and all of those things that he brings to us. And that was such an amazing story for me that I had to put that in my 7th chapter of my book. Okay. But that was the darkest time, one of the darkest times in my life, where when you have nowhere else to go, and nothing else you can do, you can only turn to God. Right. You have to. And he directed my path to where I had to go. And it was an eye opener for me, because I was a very brand new Christian. A baby Christian. And that was my first real miracle. So, yeah. Wow. So when you minister to young women who are contemplating abortion, how do you relate to them the emotional impact on you after your first abortion and each one afterwards? And then what do you say to them on what to expect and how to feel after an abortion has been performed? I related to cinder blocks. The first block was the most crushing. And then each time that I did it, it was another cinder block. and another sin of love. And you carry this heavy weight around, and it engulfs you, and it stops you from moving forward. And sometimes you can be functional, and then there are days when you can't. And then there are days where it overwhelms you. It was days I couldn't get out of bed. Not just because of it, but the guilt that I felt because I kept thinking of myself as this murderer, and I wasn't worthy of anything. So I teach my girls when we keep those things to ourselves, and I minister to them, we are giving the devil what he wants. When we release those things, only then can we be free from it. I was in the last couple of years forgiving myself for doing that, not just to God, but to me. Because each time I did that, I didn't just hurt me, I hurt God. But I didn't realize that until I got to a level of spirituality where I understood what I did and how it impacted me. And even though it helped other people, it still hurt God and it hurt me. And I had to forgive me. And that was just a few years ago. But I teach them in everything, you have to forgive yourself. You have to, because if you don't, you'll continue to carry that weight around the rest of your life.
And so I just want to kind of take a moment to kind of just expound on that, the forgiving yourself part. And especially because you were a new creature, a new babe in Christ. So for my listening audience, if there are ladies out there, young ladies or women that don't have a relationship with God, that don't know God, I hope that by listening to Miss Stephanie Harden's story, her journey, that it encourages you, that it empowers you to know that no matter where you are not so far that God cannot hear you, cannot reach you, cannot transform your life.
And they can make it.
Right. I know that you got a little bit emotional earlier because it's a very emotional topic.
Yes.
And it took everything within me not to be right there with you. What the thing that I want to know, all of the things that you endured, is that one of the things that led you to wanting to advocate for young girls?
Yes, ma'am.
So that other young girls would not have to go through what you went through?
Yes, ma'am. I wanted them to understand that regardless of their situations at home and their circumstances, it doesn't have to be yours. Just because you are raised in a certain atmosphere or your life is not going like the next person's life, that does not have to be your story. And that's not the end of your story.
Amen. Amen. I like that. So, and I'm sorry I'm silent. It's just, this is a very, very, very sensitive topic. And I don't want to rush through anything. And for my listening audience, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are feeling like this is too much for you to take in, then I want you to reach out. Go online, Google, resources where you can talk to somebody, some counselors and things of that nature. We'll have more information at the end of the show for resources that you can reach out to, because I know that this may trigger some things in some people and some of my audience that may not have even been aware that they had not dealt with these issues or felt that they had. This can be a trigger. So we are going to have resources for you to reach out to at the end of the program. So please listen through until the end. I know that it may be very overwhelming, but we do have resources for you to reach out to. And so, Stephanie, I guess the question that I have for you now, for a young lady, if she were to come to you and say, I've been through that. I don't know God, but I don't know that God would be able to embrace me because I can't embrace me. What would you say to her?
I would tell her that the God that I serve and love so much loves you more than he loves me. And he's here with his arms open. There's nothing that you could ever do to cause him to not love you. It's nothing. Not one thing.
And what would you say in your instance? You had your mother not only encouraged you to have the abortions because she wanted you to have a better life, but even when you were in an abusive situation, she prayed for you. So for ladies that don't have that support system, that don't have that mother or that family that is going to embrace them and help them through this journey, for ladies that may be encountering, even in the church, they're being ostracized because not only are they pregnant, they've become pregnant out of wedlock, but they're now considering abortion. What would you say to them if they felt that they had no place to turn?
I would tell them to think very carefully about the decision that they're going to make, because it will affect the rest of their life. I would pray with them, and I would tell them to consult God first. Let him lead you, because that's a hard road to have to live with.
It is.
And murder is murder, no matter how you look at it.
Exactly.
And no sin is higher than any other sin. And when I minister to the young ladies, and I've had young ladies come to me and talk to me about things that they're doing, and I tell them there's consequences for everything. And it wasn't all God, it was me. And I allowed things to happen to me, and I teach them not to allow things to happen. What happens to you is because you allow it. If you respect yourself, you honor yourself, and you love yourself, and you treat yourself better than other people, then they will treat you better.
Now, when you say you allowed things to happen to you, I want you kind of to expound on that, because if you've never experienced what real love is, if you've been in an environment where the dysfunction is functional for you, or the abnormal is normal, then how would you just kind of expound on what you mean about how things can only happen if you allow them to?
Well, my mother she taught me right from wrong. And she taught me about sex, and she taught me about boys. Okay. And she told me that she loved me. But she told me, not my father. And the way that my father treated me was the way that I received young men. Okay. So I had some understanding, but I didn't love myself enough to say no. Gotcha. That's what I teach my young ladies today. You have to love you first. You can't be a double till you know how to be a single. And if you don't love yourself, I like that. You cannot love anybody else. Because if you're a person like I was hurting, hurt people, hurt other people. And I was reaching in the wrong direction for the wrong thing to make myself feel better. It's no different than being on drugs. You're doing what you can to make yourself feel better instead of dealing with the problem.
And if you are hurting, we've all experienced hurt and pain. And it's an automatic thing. We reach out to whatever we feel is going to help us alleviate that pain. And so, thank you for that. What has your experience been with fathers of unborn children?
Of unborn children? Can you repeat the question?
What has your experience been with fathers of unborn children? Like fathers that know that they're about to have children, but those children they haven't been birthed yet. Like they're with someone. They're with the young lady. The young lady is expecting, but they have not yet delivered.
My personal experience?
Experience in general. Okay. Personal and
my personal experience. My experience was not good with any of my children's fathers. I remember most of them saying the same thing to me. I knew you were responsible. You would take care of the baby, because I raised the children alone. Okay. I did it on my own. And, you look at your situation and you say to yourself, okay, I can sit here and wallow, or I can move forward. I decided to move forward. But my experience with, now not everybody is like that. I've seen some young men who have, step up to the plate and take care of business. But my experience and what I've seen, the majority of the time, I tell young ladies all the time, You get in that situation, it's you and the baby.
So let me expound on that a little bit more. Say, same scenario, but the mothers are contemplating abortion. The fathers may not necessarily want her to go through with that. Have you found any situations, because with you dealing with young ladies of various ages and that are, I'm sure some of them are sexually active, where the fathers want to move forward with the birth, but the mothers don't? How do you deal with that?
Well, I worked in a clinic, a free clinic, for 4 years in Philadelphia, and we seen a lot of that. Young ladies would come in. It was a high school down the street and a high school up the other end, and they would come in with those same scenarios. They didn't want to have the baby, but the father wanted to have the baby, so we would counsel them. And it's difficult sometimes when you're in a work environment where you're not allowed to be a minister. You're not allowed to talk about things that way. So you have to talk about things on a professional level.
A secular level.
Right.
Yeah.
And so my conversation would start out, okay, what is it that you want to do? And how do you feel about each other? Because if one person wants to have the baby, the other person doesn't want to have the baby. How do we work this out where everybody gets what they need? And so that starts the conversation. And then 9 times out of 10, then we call the parents in because they're underage.
So in a situation where maybe you feel or sense that she wants to have the abortion, but she knows the father is not in agreement, and you feel like there's some fear, how would you kind of try to talk to her? Is there a way that you would try to separate them, or how would you do that?
I would speak to her alone, and I would explain to her, because I can't really minister. I could really minister, but I would tell her that there are consequences for your decision. And whether they're physical consequences, mental, spiritual, emotional, there are consequences for your decision. And you really need to think. Abortion is not a quick fix for something. It's something that is lasting and can create a lasting thing for you the rest of your life. So you want to really, really think about what you're doing. Number one. Number two, and most importantly, you need to think about yourself and if you can handle this. Because being a mother is not easy either.
Right.
And then at that point, then you need to think about being responsible, because we got to this point because there was no accountability and nobody was being responsible. Now, these are consequences that you will have to deal with. And if she's adamant about it, the only thing I do at that point is I try to pray with her or talk to her in a sense where I'm not being a professional I'm supposed to be, but still being the godly woman that I know to be. Right. Because in this society, it's very difficult to try to minister to young ladies and give them what they need without stepping on people's toes. But it's important that they understand the consequences of being a young mother and the consequences of abortion. Okay. And these are classes that we teach at Girls Incorporated.
That's good. That's good. What do you feel are the most common factors that foster a decision to abort a child?
They look at their future, the lack of money, support. I had a young lady come to me this year, as a matter of fact. She's pregnant. 14 years old. Wow. And she spoke to me about, now I had spoken to her several times. I knew she had a boyfriend. I said, look, you need to be careful. I'm teaching you to be careful. You need to be careful with what you're doing. This is what adults do. This is not what kids should be doing. Oh, I understand. And it's on the other end, the mother was in agreement with what she was doing. Oh. So that's another factor. So there's all these different factors when you're trying to help these girls to stay on track. And so she gets pregnant. And the first thing she said was she thinks she wants to have an abortion.
So I know that's got to make it even more difficult when you have to factor in the parents.
It hurt. It's hurtful. I spoke with her several times. We talked about it several times. And she changed her mind. She's having a baby. But I told her, you have to get a support system. Because you can't do this by yourself.
Right.
You're only 14. And what is he going to do? Is he going to be a part of what's going on? And, she's Hispanic, so their culture is different when it comes to stuff like that.
Right.
But just, trying to give them some kind of foundation and support, because she has my number. She can call me if she needs me for anything. I leave my information to my girls so that if they need me outside of Girls Inc., that I'm available to them for whatever. If I can help them, I will help them. And I stay in contact with her to make sure that she's doing what she needs to do. She's eating right and all of those things.
Right.
But it was a hard decision because she wanted to have an abortion. And all I could think was, okay, God, how do I help her? How do I help her? I don't want her to walk that road, because everybody doesn't bounce back from that.
Right.
And I've seen the results of young ladies who did not bounce back from it and turned into something totally different.
And the worst case scenario, ending their life as a result of the turmoil.
Exactly.
From that constantly being in their mind, I've ended this life. How can I'm not fit to live. I can definitely see that. So what has been one of the key factors in your success, even in dealing, because this is, again, a very touchy topic, and encountering the young ladies that you encounter on a daily basis that have many other factors that are going on in addition to, being sexually active. How have you successfully been able to reach them?
I share my testimony with them. A lot of times it scares them right into shape or lines them back up. Sometimes it makes them think, or they'll look at me and go, what? How did you survive that?
Right.
The grace of God.
And it also allows them to see that they too can survive whatever their circumstances are.
And I don't want to promote teenage pregnancy, and I try my best not to do that, but I let them know that, you can make it. Whatever you decide to do, you can make it. It was hard. It was difficult. But I kept in my mind the things that I was raised on, the things that my mother had told me. And I had a great support system. Everybody doesn't have that. I had an excellent support system.
Thank you. So what has been one of your most defining moments? Your life's defining moments.
My life's defining moments. When my oldest daughter, who I walked down the aisle with, when I graduated from high school, she graduated from high school and then she went to college. That was a defining moment. My first graduation from college was a defining moment when people were telling me, why are you trying to go to college? You got to take care of the kids. Well, how you think I'm going to take care of them? I need education.
Exactly.
So there were times when people were I would come over with the children and people would look at me and go, oh, here she comes with all those kids. Those were stigmas, that you have to deal with when you're a young mother and you have a lot of kids. But I never let that stop me from being first who I am, because I had to learn who I was first, and that I'm okay with me now. And God's okay with me, and I've gotten forgiveness, and I've repented, and I'm moving forward. And that's what I do. I move forward.
I just wanted to take a moment and just for my listening audience, and again, I know that this is a very sensitive topic and it can trigger some strong emotions. And so I wanted to be sure that I provided you with, those of you that are listening in the local Jacksonville area, I wanted to provide you with some resources that you can reach out to help walk you through those emotions. And so one of them is the Women's Help Center, and their contact number is 904-249-8644. And there's also We Counsel, WECOUNSEL.com, and then alloptions.org. And then there's also the world-renowned Planned Parenthood. You can Google it. I don't have the exact URL, but Planned Parenthood, that's the most common commonly known. But I wanted to make sure that you had resources, not just for help if you were trying to make a decision, but also if this has triggered you in any way, so that you are able to reach out and get some counseling or speak to someone so that it doesn't really knock you off track. And one more that I wanted to provide you with is impregnate.bethany.org. And impregnate, imprgnant.bethany, BETHANY.org. And so I just wanted to make sure that you know that you do have resources out there. There is life after abortion. Abortion is the stronghold of the enemy, and you can be healed. You can be restored. Mm-hmm. You can continue to have life and that more abundantly. And so I just wanted to thank you so much, Stephanie, for being so transparent about a very sensitive topic, about a very potentially volatile topic, especially within the community, because everybody has strong viewpoints on that particular topic. I wanted you to provide the audience with a call to action. So for those listening in, what would that call to action be regarding the topic of abortion?
Be smart. Love yourself. You need to have a life before you can give life to someone else. You have to have something that you can bring to that child. Wait, there's no rush. Take your time. Enjoy being a kid. It goes by so fast. And if you're in this situation and you feel like you have no place you can turn, you can go to God. He will provide what you need.
Thank you. And how can say someone is going through something, how can they reach out to you? Where can they find you if they consider you to be a source of inspiration, or maybe that listening ear if, though they don't want anybody else to know about what's going on? How can they reach out to Stephanie Harden?
Oh, I'm on Facebook. Stephanie E. Harden. I'm on Facebook. And I can give my email address. It's www.steph, STEF as in Frank, Harden, the number 1, @gmail.com. And if anybody wants to reach out and just talk, or you want prayer, or you just want to, vent, I'm always available. I counsel all the time. I mentor. It's part of who I am. And I decided with the experience that I had to reach back and give back to other people so that they don't make the same mistakes. I'd rather learn from somebody else's experiences than my own.
Well, again, thank you so much. I'm honored to have you, and I'm honored to call you friend. And you are an amazing, amazing, amazing woman. So there you have it. For those of you that may be encountering, contemplating abortion, contemplating what you want to do, saved, unsaved, there are options. There is life. All right, everyone. You've been listening to Michelle Speaks with me, your host, Michelle Portier. I want to thank again my special guest, Mrs. Stephanie Harden, for joining us. You can listen to us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and check out our podcast on www.180radionow.com/podcast and click on the Michelle Speaks Show logo to listen to all of our previously aired shows 24/7. Also, drop me a line at beautyforashes0126@gmail.com, and you can post your comments and questions on our Facebook page. Just go to facebook.com/Michelle Speaks, and that is Michelle Speaks with a Z. Let's deal with it and not just talk about it. Remember, if you hide it, you can't heal it.